We are on section 5.3a and we're going to start to take a look at factoring. The three different types of factoring we're going to review today are GCF, or greatest common factor, factoring by grouping, and factoring difference of squares. Now the reason I said review is that you should have seen all of these in Algebra 1, maybe used them a little bit in geometry, so we're just going to kind of dust off our memory banks. Before we start factoring, I want to remind you where the factoring comes from. Factoring is essentially another word for dividing. So it came from a multiplication problem. So what we're going to do is take it and return it to its kind of original form. So we remember distributive property. I've got this first question here, 3a times the quantity 2a minus 1. Well, to simplify that, I would distribute or multiply the 3a times 2a to get 6a squared, and 3a times negative 1 to get negative 3a. So this answer that I just got looks like the questions that we have sitting below. So we are going to factor or divide to return it to its distributed state. The first step in factoring is determine the greatest common factor of all of the terms. So I'm looking at my first question, 8x minus 2. Well, they don't both have a variable, so that's not part of the greatest common factor. So 8 and 2 both have a 2 in common. So my GCF is 2, so I write that out, and I start with a parenthesis, and I'm going to divide, I think I only have 2 steps, divide the GCF out of each term. 8x divided by 2 is 4x, and 2 divided by 2 is 1, so we've got 4x minus 1. Now, the nice part with factoring is that you always have an automatic check on your answer. You can distribute and see if you get back what you started with. So if I do 2 times 4x, that gives me 8x. 2 times negative 1 gives me negative 2, which matches what I started with, so I must have factored correctly. Now the one caution with that is that if you don't find the GCF, the greatest common factor, you could have it factored, but not factored completely. So just double check that when you're looking at these terms inside the parentheses, that they no longer have a common factor. And 4 and 1, the only common factor is 1. No point in dividing that out. All right, let's take a look at a couple more examples. 6y cubed and 54y. So I start by looking at one piece at a time. I'm going to look at my numbers, 6 and 54. Well, the GCF, if we have our multiplication charts memorized, is 6. Y cubed and y. Now, as a reminder, y cubed means y times y times y. So if I think about factoring it out that way, the two terms have one y in common, because my second term only has one y sitting on it. Dividing 6y out of each term, 6 divided by 6 is 1, y cubed divided by y cancels one of the y's I have sitting there, so I have y squared left, plus 54 divided by 6 is 9, and y divided by y cancels. Another way that I look at that, I'll kind of word it differently on my example C, so that if the dividing doesn't make sense to you, maybe this will. So looking at 10 and 5, my common factor, my greatest common factor is 5. M cubed and m squared, kind of the shortcut with this is whichever term has the smallest exponent, that's your greatest common factor. So 2 is smaller than 3. So I find my GCF, that was step 1. Step 2 is divide it out of each term. I still divide my numbers, but when I talk about my variables, I sometimes use the term pulling it out. So I've got 10 divided by 5 is 2, and if I have m cubed, or 3 m's, and I pull out or factor out 2 of them, I have 1 m left. Keep the symbol that's already there. 5 divided by 5 is 1, and if I have m squared, and I pull out m squared, there are no m's left, so the 5 divided by 5 gives us 1. All right, part D looks a little bit different. So what I want you to recognize with this one is that this is one term, and this is your second term. Each term is a product, and our product doesn't end until we hit the end of the parentheses. So when I look at my two terms, I notice that they both have a common factor of f plus 4. So I'm going to divide out the f plus 4 for my first term, which will cancel the f plus 4, leaving me with 3f. Keep the minus sign. For my second term, when I divide out or cancel the f plus 4, I have a 4 left.